Chris Van Hollen. He's the ranking member of the House Budget Committee, and good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Good to be
I don't know
with
if you got a chance to hear what Eric Cantor said, but I'm going to posit a question for you this way. We framed up this debate around the budget, what to do to reduce it, and yet so much of the conversation, at least from the Democratic side, seems to be about raising taxes on the wealthy. That seems to be the ticket, as opposed to dealing with entitlements and so much of the cost side of this equation.
Well, I don't think that's the case. What we have said is we need a balanced approach, which is what every bipartisan group that's looked at the deficit challenge has recommended and proposed, whether it's Simpson-Bowles or Rivlin-Domenici. The reason you hear a lot about trying to close these tax loopholes, in part for tax reform, but also in part for deficit reduction, is because our Republican colleagues have taken the position that you can't take 1 penny from closing a tax loophole or 1 penny from asking folks at the very top to pay a little more for the purpose of deficit reduction, not one. And it's kind of hard to take a balanced approach of cuts, which we have to make, and we already made $1 trillion, we need to make more, and revenue, if you've got one party that says they absolutely refuse to generate any revenue for the purpose of reducing the deficit.
When you consider the practical impact of the Buffett rule, is it a gimmick?
No, it's not a gimmick. What it is an example of the kind of things we should do as part of a balanced approach. I think that, you know, you've heard the conversation. You heard that President Reagan raised the same sort of issues of fairness. Look, it's part of an effort to deal with the tax code. We need to match that with cuts and other deficit reduction measures. But it was an example of the fact that our Republican colleagues aren't willing to do anything.
But we don't. Examples are great, Congressman, but $47 billion over 10 years. I know you know what a drop in the bucket that is. So all this time and all this effort and all this rhetoric and visiting Florida, on the stump here, on the stump there, talking about it, and 0 votes with a budget. Wouldn't it be better to spend more time actually being serious about putting a budget forward, addressing some of these things, than all the optical setting an example for what we want to do with $47 billion?
Well, first of all, the president did submit a budget. The budget contains cuts. It also includes revenue. This is just one piece.
Did you vote for it?
I'm sorry, I support the president's budget.
No, they got 0 votes. You were one of those.
You know what? There you go. You know that was a scam. That was not the president's budget. The president,
no, I don't know that.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, that was a talking point of the Republicans. The fact of the matter is the Democratic alternative budget that we put forward in the House and voted on in the House was much closer to the president's budget. The White House indicated that. It got a strong Democratic vote. It was our alternative budget. It took a more balanced approach. Listen, I hear you sort of, saying, poo-pooing what happened in the Senate. Here in the House, I just heard the Republican leader talking about their tax cut bill. It will do nothing for economic growth. Nothing. It will add $50 billion to the deficit. How does that help anybody? All that is a windfall for a couple folks at the very top.
But just to put that in context, that's scoring it such that there's no additional revenue derived as a result of the tax cut, correct?
Excuse me? The tax cut will cost $50 billion, and that's 1 year.
But how do you know it won't help small businesses? They just, it definitely, you just said it as like a fact that it won't do anything for small businesses?
Well, because the nonpartisan groups that have looked at this, like the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Tax Committee, have ranked this at practically the bottom of the list of things you can do to try and get the economy moving. At the bottom, it's just not cost effective. It adds to the deficit, and in that sense, it's going to be a drag on longer term economic growth. So, here you are saying that the $50 billion deficit reduction in the Senate is not enough. But here we just see an increase to the deficit of $50 billion
you were going to combine
in the House.
But you were going to combine the Buffett tax was getting rid of the AMT. So even the Buffett tax was going to add $700 billion, right, over 10 years. Wasn't that going to be used to offset some of the revenue loss for the MT?
Well, no, I don't believe that's the case. Now, if you're asking about the proposal that we put forward in our budget and the president has in his budget, there are a number of provisions, including making sure the AMT the fix to the AMT remains in place. In addition to that fact, we do ask that folks making over $1 million go back to paying the same rates they were during the Clinton administration when the economy was booming. So the Buffett rule is simply one example of the fact that our Republican colleagues refuse to ask anybody to do any more on the revenue side for the purpose of deficit reduction.
Representative Carly Fiorina is here, and I think she has a question for you.
Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. One of the things that I think and talk a lot about, and I think this is a bipartisan issue, I hope it is the need to restore the entrepreneurial foundation of this nation and really focus on small business. And one of the reasons I was encouraged by the Jobs Act is that there was bipartisan support for a focus on small business. I think so much that goes on in Washington is about big business and big labor and big government, where small business has created all of the net new job growth in the last 40 years. When you think about tax increases, how do you think about the reality that I think it is the CBO that recently estimated that 93% of small businesses file as individuals? So how do you think about that in the context of the plan that you and your party are supporting here?
Well, you're absolutely right. A lot of small businesses do file as individuals. The difference between our approach and what our Republican colleagues have proposed is we really do focus on the small businesses, because the joint tax, the CBO, the joint tax, which is the committee, which is the nonpartisan group here, has also said that of those small businesses, overwhelmingly, they're not making millions and millions of dollars, and yet most of these tax breaks go to benefit the businesses that are making millions and millions of dollars, not the small businesses. And what we would like to do is work with our Republican colleagues, and we made a start, as you say, in the Jobs Act, which I think was a beneficial but sort of very, very small step in order to try and move forward on that agenda. Look, I think if you look at other investments that we can be making, especially in the infrastructure and transportation area, that's an area we should be able to move on. The Senate was able to do it in a bipartisan manner. I mean, my goodness, they had Barbara Boxer and James Inhofe agreeing on a bill, and we've asked that the Republicans here in the House simply bring up that bill for a vote. But we're looking at a number of things. I think another round of bonus depreciation for small businesses, so that people who are investing in capital right here, helping move the economy forward, that's a positive thing we can do for small businesses. But as I said, the proposal that's been made by our Republican colleagues, that the Republican leader was just talked about, has been ranked at practically the bottom in terms of cost-effective measures to get the economy moving again.
Congressman, it is a debate that I imagine will continue for a very long time, and we will be talking to you about it, I'm sure, many more. Thanks again.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right, coming up.